My name is Holly Amato, and today I have Dr. Franklin Sollars, licensed psychologist and the clinical director of Sollars and Associates Integrative Counseling and Psychological Services, with me today on the Onward and Upward show. Dr. Sollars has been providing counseling and psychotherapy for over 30 years in the Metro Detroit area and most recently across the state of Michigan. Thanks so much for joining me today, Dr. Sollars.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here
Me
and
too.
contribute what I can, and enjoy the show with you and get to meet you and know you a little better. Yeah.
Absolutely. So before we get into all that, I also wanted to mention that you're an author of 3 books and also very involved with your 4 grandkids. That is a lot on your plate.
Yeah, the grandkids are, they're like kids in a way. Because we're very close. Some grandchildren live further away; they don't have the same kind of relationship. But we have a very close relationship. So, right now, two of them are in a theater group, Interact Entertainment at St. Dunstan Theater in Bloomfield, and so they're in the show. And so I was backstage last night doing that. We've been taking them to rehearsals. It's a labor of love, but it's a lot of work. There's a lot of work.
It's so fun.
But again, it's enjoyable.
I love that. I was a
Yeah.
backstage mom when my girls were dancers, so it is a lot of very different from the backstage perspective. A
Yes,
lot of chaos going on.
a lot of chaos, a lot of good energy, a lot of good youthful, vital energy, which is just it's pleasant to soak in. It's a lot of stuff. It's like herding cats sometimes. You know
Sure.
what I mean?
Oh my gosh, that's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it. Well, today's topic is one that I feel really especially eager to communicate because there's really been such a stigma surrounding mental health and treatment options and availability recently. So, my question to you, too, actually, what are your thoughts on where we are currently with mental health, and what do you believe still needs to be addressed to continue to educate and bring awareness to our communities?
Well, excellent question. Where we at, we've advanced in the last, I think, 20 years, you'd say, 10 years even. Interestingly, the pandemic, which brought so much pain and hardship and, even death and illness, did bring a kind of an awareness that we're all in this kind of soup together. That we it affected us all, and so the needs of people to be in therapy went way up. And at the same time, we had all this social media like we're doing now, and people started to share stories and start to talk about their being in therapy, unlike I think it's ever been done before. And I think that's normalized it somewhat. That we're all, we all have pains and problems and this and that. And sometimes we handle them well enough on our own. Sometimes we need help. We need
Mhm.
support. We need guidance. We need, instruction or advice. Other times it's, something's going on that we need to kind of look in the depths of ourselves and why do we keep recreating the same pattern we've been doing, the same kind of self-defeating patterns. And that sometimes has historical kind of personal historical kinds of roots, and that can be examined too. So these things are happening. They're happening much more than they were. And I think it's just kind of been a gradual expansion of the awareness that just like we need to go to school, we need to, learn math and science and stuff, we need to learn about ourselves. We need to learn how to manage our feelings, our fears, our needs, how to be as productive as we can, how to take care of ourselves as best we can. That's become more of a normal thing. So people are into it more. So,
I'm glad that you brought up the pandemic and the whole, because with COVID, my thought was, did COVID really kind of accentuate the need for mental health services? Or do you feel like it just like shone that light on it and made it more obvious than we had
yeah,
to
I think
deal with it?
yeah, I think both. I think it made more obvious that because people started to realize once you start to self-examine a little bit, take a look at yourself rather than just, thinking, well, what's going wrong out here and who's doing what out here, but what am I doing to make my contributions to staying in a certain way of being that's not been very good for me.
Hmm.
And when you start doing that, then the light gets shown deeper and you realize, well, maybe this stuff is historical anyway. Maybe I've had this when I was a teenager, had this as a young adult. Now I'm in middle age, perhaps, with my own kids, and it's there again, some variation of it at least. So maybe there's more to look at than just the fact that this is awful. trying to exist in this pandemic, but I have to look at myself in a deep way. Deep.
Sure. My kids were in high school. Trying to remember what grades exactly they were, but I noticed just a huge shift, not just in my kids, but in their friends. I could see they would come over, and kids that were typically just bouncy and happy, I noticed they just didn't seem to have that same light. And it
Yeah.
took a while to get it back. It was tough for us as adults, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. I don't know if they've done studies. I don't know if you've just had the experience of working with a range of ages, but my thought was I feel like the kids probably got hit the hardest.
Maybe so. I don't know that there's been comparative studies about who got the worst of the deal,
Hmm.
but we all had a difficult time. And older people, more of them died too. So I think there's a geriatric kind of end of it that was very scary too. But I think in terms of depression, kids got it a lot. Their whole life was interrupted. A year and a half, 2 years of school was not very productive. I think teachers, all of us did the best we could with online kind of stuff and sometimes at school until things got really dangerous again. But, I think that was very, very hard because they lost some of the social contact. Yeah, and the fear, you see, the fear there of, really, to be truthful, am I going to get really sick? Am I going to die? People I love going to die? Are my friends at school going to die? Is it ever going to go away? They wonder these things. So that causes this kind of, I call it love outrage. It's like one of the names of my book, Love Outrage. That it's the longing for love gets outraged. These kids just don't go, oh, that's sad. They do. They feel it's sad. But they also get mad about this. I hate this. What the hell is this going on? Who's at fault here? What, life, God, who should I be mad at? I don't know, but I'm mad. And that's a normal response. So, and then if parents are stressed, we're working hard to make things good. We don't have all the answers. Sometimes we're not as responsive as we could be. We don't listen sometimes, and that doesn't help, you know.
Right.
Studies show that, kids that have had problems, even adults, but kids, I think even more exaggeratedly, they've had problems and nobody wants to listen. That's the big deal because kids can deal with trauma, loss, but if they don't have an environment where they can talk about it, express it, cry about it if they need to, whatever, then they really get wounded. Then there's much more psychological, pathology, you might say, or troubles that develop from that. And we were all stressed, so we couldn't be as good of listeners as we maybe should have been.
Right. And coupled with the fact that we didn't know what we were dealing with either. It was something new to us. We were all kind of trying to figure out what was going on at that moment. We didn't really have a frame of reference for it. So that didn't help. So I think, the kids are, again, the people who are leading them, their parents, their teachers, mental health, people. We were all, like you said, we were all struggling a bit and trying to maintain that we were, strong and okay. But it was a tough time. So,
Yes, indeed.
yeah,
So it stressed us all.
right.
So even the caregivers couldn't be as good a caregiver to the kids that were wounded, and on it went. So yeah, there's still a lot of processing about that. And the depressive, kind of experience that it was does often telescope back into earlier. There's this thing now we've identified. It's called complex trauma. That later trauma or later, psychological wounds or woundedness, development or issues like we've had here, that telescopes back to earlier times and it gets overlaid so that the earlier times telescope into the current times and it multiplies its difficulty. And often when you get into the more recent kind of pains or injuries or loss or trauma, we have to start dealing with the older stuff too because it comes to the surface more, comes forth. We can deal with it, psychotherapists can deal with it, but you have to be there and have to listen and have to have people who are willing to want to do that. Other times we just do supportive therapy, and because the listening, as I was saying earlier, just to listen is very important. And then we reflect. We throw in a little guidance. We throw in a little encouragement. We throw in a little we call it emotional regulation in there. Is it can you manage? I think you can manage it. That's good. You would be okay. That kind of stuff, which is kind of mixture of encouragement and building on the strengths to have a sense of agency, which is that they can handle the world themselves a little bit, and they hurt and pain and frustration doesn't have to kill them, which is different now. We're building resilience, not just, we're victims. We have skills, we have mastery tools within us to handle these kind of events. And this is very good for them going forward in their life too, because it won't be the pandemic or other problems. It won't be the last problems they have. So as they get older, they'll need these resources and need to be aware of them and that
Absolutely.
they can do it.
Yeah, and you hit on a little bit ago, you mentioned fear. And, I've always thought fear is the basis for a lot of what we're experiencing. It's like the fears, and I forget the stat is something, there's like a stat that says like something like 80% or some large number of what we are afraid of never even happens, but it's the fear of it could happen. And bringing, you're talking about going through traumatic things and the psychotherapy of it. I'm looking at things and really kind of gathering like what's a common thread, and I'm sure that's part of what you may do, when you're dealing with a situation, you're talking with someone. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on, fear based. I look at fear as, sometimes it controls what people do. It's kind of like their mechanism of how they respond in life. They're almost, being run by those fears. So I can imagine that would be something, being able to sit and talk and having someone, like you said, just being listened to, but kind of disarming a lot of that and giving them the tools.
Yeah, yeah. When you're trying to help them with their resilience, their ability to manage their frustration, their ability to when they see that they're worrying about the future all the time, to put it in perspective and to lean on their own strengths and start to negotiate with people in their environment, more parents, teachers, whatever, that can be supportive. Having hope and kind of schemas, you might say, kind of plans for managing things that happen, that can be very helpful. Fear is really, it's at the bottom of a lot of kinds of problems that we have. But along with that, it's like, what are we afraid of really? Sometimes it's that we're afraid of being re-traumatized out there, or, something's terrible going to happen, or it's our mortality, which gets mixed in there. But other times it's like, it's when we've had injury already of some type, developmental, whatever, we have shame. We have shame. We have the sense of that we're not worthwhile. We're not good people. If our parents treated us horribly or just meanly or critical or whatever, we start to think that this is who we are, and then our issues play into how our parents react to us. I'm not going to blame the parents too much, but nobody's perfect, right? So this stuff comes in, and so then everything in the current environment becomes much more fearful because say you're like, I had this one client his mother used to like, she'd find his poetry and say, "You're not a genius, what the hell's the matter with you? Do you think you can do this poetry?" Stuff like that all the time. If he liked the red shirt, she'd say, "That's stupid, you should like the blue shirt." It
Mhm.
doesn't, whenever it was. So I don't know why she needed to do that, but I do think it's because intergenerationally her father was a very mean man too.
Mm.
So I think she internalized that, and then my client. But where was I going with that? The idea is that what happened then is I was helping him, focus on his body and the pain of that. He said, "I don't feel any pain." I said, "Well, you sure to try to twin?" Maybe, I don't know. I said, "Well, okay. So what kind of feelings you have?" He says, "Well, nothing." I said, "Try again." I said, "Okay. I'm mad. I'm mad about it." I said, "Okay, that's good. That's good. That's a start." So you're mad. It's understandable for you to be mad when you get criticized and yelled at and abused. Okay, what is underneath the mad? Because mad is often a secondary reaction. You know, so are you hurt? Are you embarrassed? Are you ashamed? Let's try again. Yeah. Okay, yes, I feel humiliated. I feel emasculated. I feel like she puts me down. I feel like it's always about me. And she did this too with this. She did this with this. If he had any kind of girlfriend experience, she would be, she doesn't. She would like you. So he said, "I feel emasculated and I feel punked."
Mm.
It's an interesting way to be punked, like that. That's kind of an embarrassing thing from a male perspective.
Sure.
So he's embarrassed, ashamed. He said, so stay with it. Just feel it. Yeah, it feels terrible. You know what? He said, "You think this is how I feel all women are, like my mother?" I said, "Yeah, I think that's my right." And he said, "Oh, yeah." So I said, "But are they?" I said, "No, no, they're not." I said, "Most women really like guys. They're nice to them. They're kind. They want to be with them. And nobody's perfect. They're never, they never get grabby with us or something, but they they like guys. So they're not all like them. No, no, they're not really. So this was a big deal. This was like 2 days ago.
Yes. Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, hopefully now because has trouble. He's done really good work over a few years. He has trouble with closeness with women.
Mm,
Some with men too. Developing. He's got friends, but they're kind of thin. But anyway, but so maybe now he can. Not that women don't like him; they like him. He's nice to them, but he doesn't want to get close. So
sure.
maybe this will help. We'll see. We haven't had enough time to see the outcome of that event. And
That's amazing though. I mean, think about what you're able to do with people. It's got to be tough. And I don't this is one thing I've never been able to understand how you're able to you've got to hear some really difficult things. Some things that are hard to hear, that make you feel bad. I mean, what people have been through and be able to separate that. But how rewarding to be able to give someone their life back in a certain area, like with this young man with, relationships, because that's huge. Because again, that's just going to create that cycle of, his mom wasn't good to him. And so now he's potentially, going to react in a certain way. And that just keeps it going instead of, it's great that he came to you to break that cycle and to get some clarity and to get some perspective. So it's huge what you do. And, I respect it so much. I wish there was more of you out there. It seems like we lost a good percentage of great mental health practitioners, but I do feel like we're seeing an influx more. We're seeing it's come back around again where people are recognizing we need this. It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay not to do something about it.
yeah, it creates a lot of suffering that could be alleviated if you would do something about it. Sometimes that's the first thing they need to hear. Sometimes from friends and family. Why don't you try some counseling? Counseling is often what they say. It's okay. Psychotherapy and counseling are very close,
Right.
cousins. So yeah, that's fine. But that's how they hear it sometimes. Sometimes they just get so overwhelmed and they look for help.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe they don't even have to hear anything. They just know I gotta find some place, something.
Absolutely. Now, in your industry, is there something that you feel still needs work, needs to be highlighted more or pinpointed, or even something that you feel like isn't done correctly or a big misconception that you'd love people to have cleared up?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I would say that what's happened is that therapists have rapidly been, educated in some of the short programs. It used to be that you're either a PhD or an MD. This is a longer time ago, and you had to have many years of school in this, and studying psychologists studied more personality development, emotional development. Psychiatrists studied more physiology, anatomy, medicine, and that kind of stuff. Applying medicine to treat problems. But they overlap too. But then social workers came, and that's been a long time. They've been around. But then newer professions, counseling, marriage and family therapy. But some of them are short term. So I think that's all good. We need therapists, and some of the programs are good. I'm not trying to, but I think what we have to do is make sure that we don't just say my master's degree is all. That's good enough, because it isn't. Even when I got a PhD, it was kind of in some sense just a start. You have to learn. I'll give you an example. So I've been studying trauma again. I've done a lot of studying and experimenting in therapy myself in analysis, but and processed a lot of emotional trauma. But recently I've been doing it again, like studying it more, studying EMDR, and some of these new kind of somatic focused therapies. And so I was processing things myself through meditation and stuff. And I was going deeper and processing some more childhood hurts with, my mother was kind of depressed and things like that, and the pain of all that and shame and all that. So recently, having done that, I wonder, and I thought of this yesterday. I wonder if because I processed my trauma and my loss and abuse more thoroughly, if I didn't then have a new impulse that came from my back in my mind, my unconscious, to go deeper with this client in a way that was effective because I'd done it myself. So I recognized there was more to do. That's where a good psychotherapist, they need to do their own therapy quite a bit too. And the more they process their material, and most of them do that, by the way. Most psychotherapists have been therapy themselves. But the more you process your material, the greater fund of information and resonance with your psyche soma and your ability to intuit and have insight into people's pains, loss, and trauma, and how to manage all that and how to bring that to the current moment. Where is it affecting them in their job, in their relationship, or lack of relationships, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, did
That's
that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking it's so true because, I look back at my life and the same situation could probably happen at different stages in my life. And I would have reacted differently to each exact same stimulus a different way because
Yes.
of where I was in my stage of healing or just in understanding other people or, feeling, because sometimes we feel like people are being negative to us, but they're actually not. It's like our perception. So I've always felt like everyone needs counseling, therapy, whatever the term is.
Yeah.
I think it's only helpful because, like you mentioned, if you can understand yourself better, you can then respond to people in a much more positive way and you can help maybe diffuse situations instead of hearing something someone said, taking it the wrong way and reacting. I've been trying really hard not to react, to stop, to breathe, maybe ask a question. Did you mean,
Beautiful.
when you said this? And I've learned those things and it helps a lot.
Yes.
Changes everything.
That's that's beautiful. That's great. Yeah. So you recognize where you maybe were triggered or maybe still get triggered
Mhm.
because we get triggered. But instead of just being reactive, right? The first thing you do is say, well, screw you too,
Right,
whatever.
exactly,
Blast off.
and
Yeah.
unfortunately, I
Yeah.
have done that before. I've
Yeah.
reacted
Well,
that way.
yeah.
Yeah,
I've done that too.
unfortunately.
Yeah, me too.
We're different now,
But
right? We're doing better.
as the more you learn about yourself, doesn't mean you can't be assertive and even angry at times in the health. You got to get off my foot. It's hurting. Get
Right,
off my foot.
right, right.
But you don't have to be if they trigger you don't have to go top them with being mean to them, put
Right.
them just like okay, that's kind of hurtful. Ouch. Okay, have I done something? It's more like reflective, and it's even you can even say ouch without saying yeah, and you're a horrible person. That's one thing. It's the need for punishment when people injure us. That's something we got to work. Not that we can't stand up for ourselves, which we should sometimes, but even that has, limits. So sometimes that pushes into, going too far and triggering people. But we almost all have a little bit of a need. You hurt me, I get to punish you. Whoopee, it's my opportunity.
Exactly.
Yahoo! Take this and take that. That's how things escalate, right?
And then you don't even remember what the whole disagreement was because
That's
now
right.
you've escalated it and words are huge. Words have power and words, how we respond, the initial issue is now forgotten because now we're just in a battle of, who can one up each other.
Yes, that's right. Who's going to triumph and who's going to punish the other one out of their position? And if we feel if we put them down enough, then we win, they lose. That makes us feel better. That's not good. That's not win-win. We want to approach relationship issues as best we can, negotiatively and as a win-win possibility.
I love win-win. I love that. I try to do that in my business too. I mean, obviously, I'm in a
Yeah,
different business. I'm in real estate, but you'd be surprised. I always say to people, and a lot of realtors, we feel that we, have to do a lot of counseling. Believe it or not, there's a lot that goes through with with the emotions, especially with people, getting divorced. I work a lot with people getting divorced. I'm sure you do as well. A lot of emotions there. And then you're walking through a very stressful situation. You're going through a process of buying a house, which is I believe one of the top 5 most stressful things you can do if it still is up there on that list,
it is. It's
moving
still
and
high on that list.
yeah. So it's like couple it with going through a divorce or let's say you lost your spouse and that's just a lot. It's a lot to handle and people need to know that there's places they can go. So I'd love to hear about the way that you operate. I understand you've got over 20 offices across Michigan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And more than that, or other than that, I don't know the best way to say it. We also do a lot of teletherapy.
Hmm.
So either like this on video or just phone or, various ways. Because that way we can reach people, maybe in the UP or, in more remote areas. We can't have places everywhere. Anyway, that's from the pandemic too.
Right.
They unhooked this idea that you had to be in person. So, but so there's a lot of that too, and we've become better at how do you use teletherapy effectively? We've there's been classes in that, and there's been work on that. So we do a lot of that too. But we have a lot of places, and we have a lot of therapists that cover a lot of different problems. Trauma, depression, anxiety, psychosis, schizophrenia, relationship issues, marriage and family issues, child needs, ADHD. We do psychological testing at these various locations, for ADHD, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, kids and stuff. And then we can follow up with therapy or refer them back to their therapist or their pediatrician, whatever it might be, for them to go forward with what they got. Sometimes they need that. Kids need like a test sometimes to help them with their IEP at
Mhm.
school, their planning for their educational needs, stuff like that, which is very helpful to them. Or sometimes medication, because doctors get in trouble sometimes when they prescribe this medicine if they don't have, I might say, objective support, and the test is objective support for that. They think, you're overprescribing. So
Right. Well, it sounds like you're a one-stop shop, and I'm assuming that you also work in tandem with some of the other providers. Obviously, if somebody needs more of an inpatient assistance, and you mentioned medication, what does that process look like when you have an individual that maybe you feel like needs to have a little bit more than what you can provide maybe through telehealth?
sure, sure. Well, it can go in various directions. But that's where we try to teach clinicians to recognize the problems quickly and then make an assessment about that. And sometimes it's ongoing because you might see them for 6 months or so and things change a little bit. But anyway, so we have an array of psychiatrists, of nurse practitioners who prescribe psychotropic medication, physician's assistants they don't actually work for us, but we have a network where they refer to us, we refer to them, and we keep the ones that we think are doing a really good job, and we kind of don't refer to the ones that aren't. So over time, it's got to build up pretty good, and they refer to us too when there's a need. So that's there, and seeing it sometimes, clinicians need to recognize it. And need to be the patients need to be told, or clients need to be told, medication could help this. I'm not saying you have to do it, although sometimes we can't treat them if they don't, if they're really psychotic. Mostly it's an option. If you're depressed, you can take it, and sometimes you get help. Some people don't want it, but some people get a lot of help. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that was available to you. That kind of thing. And then we can make referrals based on that from their region, although psychiatry can be done through telehealth now too. But a lot of people want to go in and see their psychiatrist too. So we can do that. Now with other things, like if they're really in bad shape, they're psychotic, and they have a hard time getting stabilized in medication and treatment outpatient, which we call it, that's our outside individual psychotherapy or family therapy. Then we refer them to intensive outpatient, which is kind of more structured, where they come, 3, 4 times a week. They go to groups, they go to psychoeducational classes, or partial hospitalization. And that sometimes is very helpful to get them started, get them medication if they need it, get them enough therapy and enough support, enough education, enough resources, bring the family, so that then when they come out, they can go back to the individual therapy and carry on from there. So those are a couple of things we do that are important. And drug and alcohol referrals, where there are programs that are partial hospitalizations or inpatient programs. But sometimes, somebody tried numerous times, and we have alcohol addiction counselors. But it's hard sometimes because there's so much enticement out there. There's so much of it all around them in an environment that sometimes it's helpful that they get a week or two away from that. Other times it's just intensive psychoeducation at a place like Maple Grove. We refer people to us in West Bloomfield, I think. And they have the psychoeducation, and they have people on video therapy, and they see the psychiatrist, and they have individual counseling. So they have a whole array of that. Plus they have the urines, they call it, so they can tell how well they're doing with it. Are they really being sober or not? And it's not to be indicting if they're not, but just what's going on, right?
Right.
Because sometimes they'll say, I'm doing fine. I haven't drank, I haven't taken any drugs when they have. So that we need to know that as counselors.
Okay. What are your thoughts on group therapies? For example, there's things like grief share programs for people experiencing loss, divorce care programs, obviously the 12-step programs that we know about. Do you facilitate any of that, or do you have that at any of your locations, or just what are your thoughts on, because we did touch on, we talked about COVID, the social contact. I'm wondering if you feel like that's a great tool for people experiencing the same type of situation or loss.
Yeah, well, it can be. It can be. Sometimes they want more than that, but sometimes they want that and therapy,
Hmm.
you know. So we do have some of that. We have like a couple of interns just started another social anxiety group where people have trouble around groups or talking with people. They get anxious, and there's more than one, and it's real safe. So that's a new group that just got developed. Sometimes we have, people with depression groups and things. They kind of recur. Otherwise, we do things like, say, they're cancer survivors or struggling with cancer. We might refer them to Carolyn, which used to be Beaumont. They have groups like that. So we either provide some of that ourselves or we make referrals for that. And I think it's very helpful. And a lot of people really benefit and have benefited for decades from 12-step programs. So yeah, that's just fine. And we encourage that, and they have a what do we call it doing this? It's a helper, but they got a name for it. It's like a coach that they have.
Right.
Anyway, we encourage them to see the person, you know, kind of work as best we can in conjunction. And, not that we collaborate with the person, but we just encourage their active participation in whatever they're doing that's health producing, right? Which sometimes is going to groups and seeing their person.
Yeah. And the accountability too. I know for myself, being self employed, I don't have a boss, right? So it's always nice to have a coach. I have a coach in business and different things because that accountability is good. I think just having someone there to talk to additionally outside of maybe the hours when you're meeting with your therapist. So some of the groups, kind of create bonds and friendships, and that's huge with the human condition. So, it seems to me like it would be nice to see more of that. That's my own thought, just as an outsider, not in the profession at all. I do see people going through different things, and I think, it'd be great if we had in churches or wherever more of these types of groups where people can not feel like they're so different or, they're the only one going through it. It kind of feels good. When I got divorced, I went through divorce care and it felt great to be able, because you can only talk to your friends so much, and everybody, it's like, especially if they haven't been through it, but you're in a group talking about a topic that everybody's experiencing. And it was huge because there was somebody facilitating it, which was, leading us. But also, I'm not the only one going through this. I'm the only one, not the only one who feels this way. Just kind of helpful.
Yeah, very, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, there's that listening thing, and people maybe share their own stories, which some of them have a certain amount of success, but you see what you can use, what doesn't work for you, and they're not telling you what to do, right? The
Right.
facilitator will probably guard against that. So, yeah, very helpful, very helpful. And 12 steps is not, typically not leader led, but that is a leader kind of support group, what you're talking about, that's around too. And, most of them are found in churches,
Hmm.
mosques, synagogue,
Hmm.
or hospital systems.
Hmm.
So not that there are other places too, but there's a lot of them. That's where people find them through. Or we know about them because we Google it and say they're over here, they're over there. You can go to this one or that one's close by.
Right. No, it's great. It's great to have those resources. What would you say? Let's see. What would you say is the best part of what you do? Maybe the most rewarding, or just what's the best part of getting up and getting to do what you do?
Well, it's helping people. Helping people. Yeah, I get such a joy out of that. I mean, that's why I do it, I suppose. But I mean, specifically, when you say something or do something, or even just to be with somebody, it sounds, but yeah, meaning you give them your attention, your support, your interest, your reflections, your thought, and you stay with them, and some of that, over time. And for instance, and if they say something that they've done something wrong, for example, and you don't say, "Well, you're stupid for doing," which sometimes they get from
Right.
friends. We don't say stuff like that.
Hmm.
So then they internalize. In other words, they identify with us and they internalize what we call benevolence. Or an observing person that inside their own head, an editor that doesn't beat them up all the time. They identify with that, so they start to be nicer to themselves and kinder to themselves. That's emotional learning that happens in therapy. But anyway, when things like that happen, like this last client I told you about, that movement was felt. I could feel sad about it. It's like a joy. It's like, why didn't that happen before? Poor guy, suffering this way. So it's a kind of a tears of sadness, like you finally maybe this is going to help you this way. It's very emotional, very powerful. That's the really good part of therapy. Sometimes when they're so mad at you and you have to take the slings and arrows, like Hamlet would say, whether to suffer the slings and arrows, outrageous fortune. Well, you get a lot of slings and arrows, because you're you take the place of parents, and before we call it the transference. They want to, they're mad at you because you failed them, you weren't empathic enough, you didn't fix their problem, whatever it might be. Or sometimes because you screwed up, because we do screw up too. But so we got to deal with that. But still, that's part of it. So be able to have enough resilience to take that and help them understand where that's coming from, even have boundaries where we can take care of ourselves, but not have to, say, well, you're fired. You can't be a client of mine. And I have to do that. That's really helpful. So anyway, I like all that stuff.
Well, yeah. And that's the name of the podcast is Onward and Upward. And I can't think of another industry where that is happening more often, like a daily transformation that you get to be a part of with people. I can imagine it just feels good to watch someone come in one way and leave another way, when you're able to discharge them from treatment, or, they're good, right? It's like, I'll just call you when I need you. You'd be able to see that and know that you had a huge hand in that.
Yeah,
It's
that's
rewarding.
right. Yeah, they're continuing their journey. And, sometimes they come in working on one thing, and then a couple of years later, they're working on something much more profound, powerful. Like, why do they always find a negative relationship? Or why are they so, can they never achieve at work? Well, they find out they have inhibitions about these things. They're scared of them. They feel like they responsibilities too much. They don't deserve it. And then some of that has more profounder kind of directions that can't be fixed in the short term. Can be helped a little bit, but it takes more work. Sometimes they're, they come in. It's like a person. I think of therapy like a train. Person gets on a train. Okay, they're going to go a couple stops down. Maybe that's all they want to go for now, right?
Right.
Maybe they'll get back on the train further. Maybe not. Sometimes they want to go for a long ride. It's up to them.
Right. Well, good. Well, this has been such a great conversation, but we need to talk about, before we end up, I'd love to hear more about your books, because we mentioned that you're an author with 3
Yes.
books. Would love to hear about, your work and where we can find that.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So my first 2 books were called Love, Outrage, and the Liberation of the Core Self. And it's based on the idea that we all have this divine spark, universal self. You find these concepts in, humanistic psychology. You also find it in things like, Christian mysticism, like with Swedenborg. You find it with Sufism, like Rumi, and Buddhism. And so anyway, this idea that there's this universal self, which has divine, it's connected with the divinity, and that you want to kind of liberate that. Not just, work from our ego and our logic, but that we want to tap into this place in us that resonates with spiritual kinds of impulses and guidance and God's love. Kind of things, and empathic connection with us. So that's what it's about, and it's a psychodynamic book. So it talks about the 3 elements of the personality: the ego or the conscious, and then this, like the child, lower self child, or the shadow, which is the kid that gets angry, the love outrage, because his longing for love has been wounded and damaged and traumatized, and so he gets mad and he gets angry, and then they have faults, and then faults they get spiteful or bitter, or I'm not going to take care of myself. I make you take care of me. I'm entitled. And then it creates more problems. So we go through these layers to liberate the core self. And then there's a workbook, which is called the Liberation of the Core Self workbook.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Why make it hard if you don't have to?
Yeah, right. Anyway, and then the final book is more of a book of stories. I've also made a film. It's called Pirates of the North Coast. It's a romantic comedy. You can get it on Amazon Prime, $4. I think.
What was it called
And
again?
it's about Pirates of the North Coast.
Pirates of the North Coast. All right. So when anybody's bored and they're flipping through, now we have a recommendation.
It's a romantic comedy. It's about a guy coming of age, which I was thinking of people getting married and getting in a house, which is hard. But a lot of times they get married. Sometimes they don't. But the deal, it's about him coming of age and dealing with adulthood, adulting. And he's got kids around, and he doesn't want to do it. He does want to do it, and all the drama that goes with that, And it's set in northern Michigan, and it's about the lakes and the shipping and stuff, and lighthouses as a beacon of the core self, higher self, or universal self. Anyway, but it's playful. It's enjoyable. Anyway, but okay, and the other book is Food for Thought, Psyche, Spirit, and Soul. It's a group of stories, and it's got poems, and it's got aphorisms, and it's written by me and many therapists and educators and some ministers who have contributed stories about passing through situations, dealing with pains and losses, or joys and, all that kind of stuff, childhood, middle age, adulthood, relationships. It's a little bit of a memoir because I talk about my relationship with my wife and going to spiritual counseling for a number of years and how that helped and what particular ways that helped to, make our relationship really, fun and loving and all that kind of thing. So that was, and they're on Amazon. You type in Franklin Sollars books, you'll get the 3 books. They're probably I think they're at Borders, they're at all those, but Amazon's probably the easiest.
Yes, everybody loves Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon, Franklin Sollars books, and you'll see the 3 books. There's also some podcasts that I made about spiritual and emotional growth with some of my therapist friends. We called it the Transformation and Transcendence Roundtable podcast. There's like 12, 14 before we kind of ran out of gas.
Right. Well, good. This is great information. No, I'm glad because, I just want to thank you again for joining me today, Dr. Sollars, and really for sharing some vital insight and information into the mental health conversation. I'm confident as we continue to have the open dialogue that brings awareness and, of course, breaks that stigma that's been attached to mental health, we're going to be able to help more people. And I know that's important to you in their healing process. And I'm sure our viewers want to know more about how they can reach you. We know how to find your books and your movies. So we're excited about that. Please let us know the best way to get in touch if someone's thinking about, hey, I think I need to get some counseling.
Okay. Well, it's F Sollars at Sollars1.com. Or I have a website. It's called Sollars Associates. Yeah. Sollars
Perfect.
Associates.
Wonderful.
And then my number, should I put my number up here? Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I will definitely have that down below, all the ways you can reach Dr. Sollars, his social media handles, so you can find him everywhere because again, here we are in the beautiful world of the internet. So I love that we can do that. Yes. So thank you again so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you on today.
Well, me too. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you, Holly, very much.
Absolutely. And we want to thank all of you for joining us today as well. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel, like our episode, tap that bell for notifications so you're the first to know when new episodes of the Onward and Upward podcast are posted. And until next time, be blessed.